Well, today I want to show you how to write up a lab in your lab notebook. When you start a lab write-up, you always want to use a two-page spread. So what that means is that on the very first page of your lab notebook, yeah, it's liable to be blank, and that's fine. But I always want you to use a two-page spread so that you've got plenty of space to do everything that you need, and everything is right in the same place when you open your lab notebook up and you can see both pages at the same time. In the upper right-hand corner of the left-hand page, you should put your name and you should put the date that you're doing the work. And in the center of the very top line, you're going to write experiment 1.1, experiment 1.2, as well as the title of the experiment. That's the setup, and that should be followed no matter which experiment you're doing. You're going to do that every single time. The first section of your lab write-up is called data and observations. And so as you're going through actually doing the experiment, the data is any type of measurement you make, whether you're measuring a length, whether you're weighing something and you're recording a mass, whether you've got a liquid and you're recording a volume of that. Anything that you directly observe as far as making measurements goes in this section. Additionally, if we're running some sort of a chemical reaction, if you see something start to bubble, if you see something change color, if you see it start to smoke, any type of reaction that you see, anything that you observe with your eyes, anything that you smell, anything that you hear with your ears, if the container feels like it's getting warm, anything that you're discerning with your senses, all of that goes into data and observations. So those are the things you're recording while you're doing your experiment. And as a side note, I would really encourage you to make sure that anything that you put in your notebook, that you're recording it in ink. Because what tends to happen in chemistry labs is that you inadvertently knock something over or you spill something, and then if you've got water spilled all over your notebook and you've been writing it in pencil, everything disappears, and that's really, really frustrating. So you don't want that to happen. So if you've written it in ink, even if you spill something on it, then you're still going to be able to read it once it gets dry. Okay, so we talked about the data and observation section. The next section is calculations. And calculations are going to be any type of manipulation you do with the numbers that you've measured. So something as simple as if you've measured the diameter of the bottom of a bottle and you need the radius, you have to divide it by 2. That's a calculation. That's something that you had to do to the numbers. You didn't record it directly from your measurement. If you're going to calculate a density, if you're going to calculate how much yield you should have gotten from a chemical reaction, all those are calculations, and those are all things that should go down in the calculation section. Now, anytime you record a number, whether it's in the data section or whether it's in the calculation section, you want to be careful about a couple of things. The first thing is that you want to make sure that you've recorded it to the proper number of significant figures. As we've discussed, you know that all measuring devices have a limit to the amount of precision with which you can use them. And so you want to make sure that the last digit that you record is the one that you have estimated. The others you're sure about, the last one you've estimated, and it's really important to get that last digit recorded. So first, you need to make sure you've recorded everything to the proper number of significant figures. Secondly, you need to make sure that you put units after every single number that you write. So if you write 6.2, 6.2 doesn't tell me anything unless you tell me 6.2 centimeters, 6.2 milliliters, 6.2 miles, 6.2 apples, 6.2, whatever it is that you're measuring or recording, you have to make sure you put units on it, because a number without units is absolutely meaningless. Okay, so significant figures in your measurements, units on every single unit, on every single measurement, on every single calculation. And then as you're doing your calculations, you want to be sure that you're keeping track of significant figures and that the final answer that you get is recorded to the proper number of significant figures as well. Finally, the last thing that you're going to do is to write a summary. The summary has several different sections. The first part of the summary is where you're going to summarize what you did in the experiment. Now, what I don't want is for you to copy the experiment out of your book. I don't want all of the itty nitty-gritty details of everything that you measured and everything that you did. What I want is a summary. So think of it like this. Pretend that you're sitting down at the dinner table tonight with your dad, and you're saying, hey dad, this is what I did in chemistry today. And so you're going to summarize. You're not going to tell him I had 2 grams of this and I measured this length to be 4.2 centimeters. You're just going to say, I added this and this together and then this reaction happened. So you're going to summarize it. So when you're writing that, pretend you're telling your dad what you did in chemistry today. Then you're going to, again, summarize your calculations. So maybe you measured the mass and the volume of a substance and then you calculated the density. Okay, something just as simple as that. Again, it's a summary. Then what I want you to do is to tell me what chemical principle did the experiment illustrate? What did you learn from it? Were you trying to prove some kind of principle? You want to state that chemical principle and you want to show how it applies to what you just did. Now that may seem really confusing to you, and so what I've done for the first 3 experiments, I've written up sample experiments for you to look at, and I've sent that to you in a separate document. And so once again, everything that I've said is pretty well in that document, but because writing up experiments is something that's a really, really important part of chemistry, I wanted to not only have it written, but to let you be able to hear it in case it's easier for you to understand something when you hear it as opposed to reading it. So if you have a question on something I said, go back and refer to that document. Again, there's some samples there for you to look at so you can see what does a summary look like? What is it supposed to be in there? How should I have those sections labeled? So look at that and pattern your write-up after those write-ups as well. When you get it done, take a picture of it, send it to me, and then I'll give you plenty of feedback as to what needs to change, what needs to fix, and what needs to be fixed, and what you need to do to make your next write-up just that much better.